Vet refused to treat Keanu Reeves's dog, instantly regrets it when the truth is revealed. Imagine walking into a small veterinary clinic with your beloved dog, only to be met with confusion and cold stares. That's exactly what happened when Keanu Reeves, the Hollywood superstar known for his humility and kindness, brought his sick dog to the vet. Now you might be thinking, why would a vet turn away a famous actor? Especially when his dog was in obvious distress. But that's exactly what happened. It was a regular day at the clinic when Keanu, dressed in his usual low-key attire, strolled in with his dog. No cameras, no entourage, just him and his furry friend, the dog. A gentle, aging golden retriever named Rufus looked tired and unwell. Keanu's concern was written all over his face, but he remained calm and polite, hoping the vet would help. However, the receptionist barely glanced up from her computer. Without recognizing who she was talking to, she curtly said, "We're booked solid today. You'll need to come back some other time." Keanu, being the humble person he is, didn't argue or make a fuss. Instead, he quietly asked if there was any way they could squeeze Rufus in, explaining how the dog had been struggling with his health for the past few days. But the staff seemed more interested in getting through their day than helping a sick animal. One of the vet assistants, overhearing the conversation, sneered, "We don't have time for walk-ins. Come back next week, maybe." At that moment, no one realized they were turning away one of the most generous celebrities in the world. Keanu, a man who is known for quietly donating millions to charity, never used his fame to push people around. All he wanted was someone to help his beloved dog, who had been by his side through thick and thin. Still, the clinic staff remained indifferent, their judgment clouded by assumptions. Keanu could have left right then and there, but he stayed calm, simply pleading for them to at least take a quick look at Rufus. He wasn't asking for special treatment, just basic care for his dog. As the minutes dragged on, more and more clients came in, filling the waiting room. Keanu patiently waited, still hoping someone would change their mind and show some compassion. But as he sat there, he couldn't help but overhear whispers from behind the counter. The staff began gossiping, their voices low but loud enough for Keanu to catch fragments of their conversation. "Who does he think he is?" one of them muttered. Another chimed in, "Just because he's famous doesn't mean he can jump the line." The judgment was swift and unfair, all based on appearances. Keanu didn't come in expecting any special treatment, yet here he was, being treated like an inconvenience. As Rufus lay at his feet, panting softly, Keanu glanced down at his loyal companion. His heart sank. He knew time was running out, and he didn't want to see his best friend suffer any longer. All he needed was a vet to do their job. But no one was willing to step up. And just when it seemed like all hope was lost, something completely unexpected happened. A woman, sitting quietly across the waiting room, had been watching the scene unfold. She had been there for her own pet's appointment, but couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Why was this man, who was clearly worried about his dog, being brushed off so easily? She recognized Keanu, but that wasn't what caught her attention. It was the way he treated his dog with such care and love, despite the cold treatment from the clinic staff. She stood up, crossed the room, and tapped Keanu on the shoulder. "Excuse me," she said softly. "I couldn't help but notice your dog doesn't look too well. I'm a vet, and I'd be happy to take a look if you'd like." Keanu looked up, surprised and relieved. "Are you sure?" he asked, not wanting to impose on her. The woman nodded, her eyes kind, but serious. "I can't sit here and watch this any longer. Your dog needs help, and I'm not going to stand by and do nothing." Without another word, she gently examined Rufus right there in the waiting room. her experienced hands quickly identifying what was wrong. As she worked, the clinic staff began to notice. The receptionist's eyes widened, and the vet assistant, who had brushed Keanu off earlier, stopped in her tracks. Suddenly, they realized who they had just refused to help, and the mood in the room shifted. But the damage was done. Keanu wasn't concerned about their reactions. His focus was entirely on Rufus, who now seemed to be getting the care he so desperately needed. The vet worked quickly, her face filled with concentration as she treated the dog. Keanu watched in silence, his gratitude immeasurable, and just as she finished her initial examination, the truth about what was wrong with Rufus was revealed, a truth that would shock everyone in the room. It was at that exact moment when the clinic's vet, who had been in the back office the entire time, finally walked out. His face turned pale when he saw what was happening, and before he could say anything, Keanu locked eyes with him. The vet, who had been in the back, finally stepped forward, looking visibly uncomfortable. He was an older man, well experienced in his field, but in that moment, he seemed caught off guard by the situation unfolding in his own clinic. His eyes shifted nervously between the woman examining Rufus and Keanu, who remained calm but intense, watching every movement. It was clear that this wasn't just any dog for Keanu. Rufus was family, and now the truth about Rufus's condition was about to be revealed. The woman, who had stepped up when no one else would, finished her initial check and turned to Keanu with a serious expression. "It's not good," she said quietly, her voice filled with concern. "He's suffering from a severe infection that's been left untreated for too long. He needs immediate care." Keanu's heart sank. He had known something was wrong, but hearing those words made it real. He looked down at Rufus, who was now lying still, too weak to even lift his head. This dog had been his companion through so many ups and downs in life. Keanu had saved him from a shelter years ago, and they had been inseparable ever since. Rufus had seen Keanu through tough times, offering comfort when no one else could. The idea of losing him now was unbearable. The clinic vet finally spoke up, trying to regain control of the situation. I can take a look now," he stammered, as if hoping to smooth over the fact that he had ignored them earlier. But it was too late. Keanu could see through the sudden change of heart. The woman had already stepped in when no one else did, and the damage was done. The tension in the room was thick. The other clients in the waiting room had gone quiet, watching the scene unfold, realizing who had been sitting amongst them all along. Keanu Reeves wasn't the type to throw around his fame, but now people were realizing what had happened. They had witnessed a man, not just a celebrity, being treated unfairly because no one bothered to care. And now, the life of his dog was on the line. As Keanu stood there, weighing his options, memories of Rufus began to flood his mind. He remembered the day he first adopted him, a scrawny, scared pup that no one wanted because he wasn't a purebred or a show dog. Keanu didn't care. He had always believed in giving those overlooked a second chance, whether it was a person or a dog. Rufus had grown into a loyal companion, always by his side, no matter where life took them. Keanu couldn't lose him. Not like this. Not because someone couldn't be bothered to help when they needed it most. Meanwhile, the clinic vet's face was growing paler by the second. He had made a critical mistake by ignoring Keanu and Rufus earlier, and now the woman who had taken charge was making him look incompetent in his own clinic. I didn't realize the situation was this serious," he muttered weakly. But the excuse sounded hollow, even to him. The woman who had taken over stood up, shaking her head. "You had every opportunity to help, but you didn't even take a moment to listen," she said, her voice calm but firm. This dog is in serious condition. We need to get him to an emergency facility now." Keanu nodded, knowing she was right. Without wasting another second, Keanu gently scooped Rufus into his arms. Feeling the weight of his old friend's body against his chest, the dog's eyes were half closed, his breathing shallow. Time was running out, and Keanu knew that every second counted now. The woman who had stepped up to help was already moving toward the door, urging him to follow. The clinic staff stood frozen, unsure of what to do, guilt washing over them for not helping when it mattered. As Keanu walked out of the clinic with Rufus in his arms, the tension that had built up inside him began to dissolve, replaced by a sense of urgency. He didn't care about the people behind him, or the whispers that followed. His only focus was getting Rufus the care he needed. The woman led him to her car, offering to drive him to an emergency vet hospital nearby that she trusted. Without hesitation, Keanu agreed and carefully settled Rufus in the back seat. As they drove through the city, Keanu stroked Rufus's fur, silently willing him to hold on just a little longer. The ride felt like an eternity, but finally, they arrived at the emergency hospital. The staff there, recognizing the seriousness of the situation, rushed Rufus into the back without delay. Keanu stood in the waiting room, the woman by his side, both of them silently hoping for the best. This time, there was no coldness, no judgment, just professionals doing their job. As the minutes stretched into what felt like hours, Keanu reflected on how quickly everything had spiraled from a simple vet visit to a life-or-death situation. It all came down to compassion, something the first clinic had lacked when it mattered most. Finally, a vet emerged from the back, her face calm but serious. Keanu braced himself for the worst. "Rufus is stable for now," she said, her voice steady. "It was a severe infection, but we managed to treat it in time. He'll need to stay with us for a few days for monitoring, but I'm optimistic about his recovery." Relief washed over Keanu, and for the first time in hours, he felt like he could breathe again. Rufus was going to be okay. He turned to the woman beside him, gratitude filling his eyes. "I don't know how to thank you," he said softly. "If you hadn't stepped in." She smiled, shaking her head. "You don't have to thank me. I did what anyone should have done. It's just a shame that others didn't see it that way." The reality of what had happened that day hit hard. The first clinic had refused to help, too caught up in their assumptions and judgments to see the urgency of the situation. If that woman hadn't intervened, things could have ended very differently for Rufus. Keanu's humility and kindness had been met with coldness. But in the end, it was compassion that saved the day. As Keanu left the hospital that night, he couldn't stop thinking about what had unfolded. It wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about treating others and their animals with respect and empathy. Rufus wasn't just a dog. He was a friend, a companion who had been by Keanu's side through thick and thin, and every pet deserved to be treated with the same level of care, no matter who walked through the door. Days later, when Rufus was finally well enough to come home, Keanu felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. He knew he had been lucky that someone had cared enough to help, but he also knew things needed to change. Keanu made a quiet but powerful decision that day. He reached out to the emergency hospital and the woman who had helped him, offering his support in expanding their outreach program, ensuring that no animal would be turned away in a time of need, regardless of circumstance. In the end, the lesson was clear. Compassion and kindness should always come first. And for Keanu Reeves, it wasn't about making a scene or holding a grudge. It was about turning a bad experience into something positive. Rufus, now healthy and back at Keanu's side, had been saved, not by a name or celebrity status, but by simple human decency. That's what made all the difference. The vet who had refused them that day, well, let's just say he quickly realized the error of his ways when news of the incident spread. The clinic's reputation took a hit, but more importantly, it served as a wake-up call for everyone involved. Sometimes it takes a moment of failure to remind us all of what really matters, treating every living being with the care and respect they deserve. And as for Keanu and Rufus, they went back to their quiet life, side by side, as they had always been. But now, their bond felt even stronger, knowing they had overcome this trial together. In the end, it wasn't about fame, fortune, or power. It was about love, loyalty, and the simple yet profound act of kindness.